Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a video covering two products, the 620S from Sennheiser, the Gunnr from Schiit Audio. And I wanted to pair these together because the 620S is an awesome closed-back headphone. It works fantastically for my purposes listening to music. I like something that feels analytical, like I'm getting a lot of information, but also something a little bit fun. So the 620S has a elevated bass and also has some sparkle and raz in the upper region to make a music listening experience feel rather neutral, but still fun to listen to. The 620S is a exceptionally comfortable headphone. It's got a lot of swivel here. It's got the leather ear cups, leather cushioning, and it is reminiscent to other Sennheiser builds. In gaming, for single-player games, I could rock this any day of the week. I've been playing Deadlock really mainly as my main game right now, and this is fantastic for Deadlock because the imaging, the localization is there, and I don't need much more than good imaging and good audio, good resolving audio to have fun in a game like Deadlock, which is a MOBA, a third-person shooter MOBA. Now, the Schiit Gunnr, the reason I wanted to pair that with the 620S in this video is because the 620S falls behind in games like Apex and Call of Duty. That's because in Apex, the separation takes a hit, and the depth perception read falls off a little bit at a distance. It has that effect in Valorant as well, but in Valorant, this is actually a very competitively set closed-back headphone. I think the information read that you get in Valorant is actually very good on this set, but it's Apex and Call of Duty that fall behind, and that's because when too much is going on around you, the separation, the layering, when multiple of the same gun is going off, it's hard to parse those out. And when a lot is going on, grenades and things happening around you, it's hard to hear the more subtle slides and separate out those things as they are happening. Now, the depth perception read and localization aren't bad when not a lot is going on. Just in Apex, when things are happening at a distance, the gunfire is not as emphasized, and it's just a smidge harder to get that depth read. Now, I wanted to see with the Schiit Audio Gunnr, this is an all-in-one amp DAC. And you can see here at the front panel, you do have a headphone output, 6.35, works with, again, your IEM adapter for a 635, as well as your headphones. It has a microphone input, which is fantastic. Not a lot of amp DACs do. And I do think this is better and cheaper than the Mayflower Arc MK2, so this is a really great unit. And you do have three different gain levels here at the front with this little lever. Low, medium, high, and then this does turn on and off the functionality for the EQ settings, which they refer to as width and presence, which you see with these knobs here, width on the left, presence on the right, and then you do have an input select here on the far right for optical and USB. Now, getting to those EQ functions, I'm going to flat out say they are an absolute gimmick. I wanted to test with the 620S to see if I could get any benefit. And I think there's an ever so slight one in the presence region, and I will get to that just ever so slightly. It has absolutely no impact on my separation or layering, and in terms of getting the impact of this soundstage, which they're advertising this gimmick, this soundstage widening, the problem with that is if you were to effectively turn that soundstage slider to the right, it's not going to just widen your soundstage. It affects the general frequency response of your IEM or your headphone. When you turn it to the right, what you will notice is things begin to become a little too bright, a little too tangy, and definitely sometimes sizzly, depending on what you're using. Some things may benefit a little bit more than others, depending on the frequency response default out of the box. With the 620S, I did notice, again, very good headphone for Valorant. I think the localization is there. Depth perception is fantastic. You get a nice read when somebody's about to come out from behind a wall, and the separation is there despite this little bit of bloominess on the bass for Vandal, Operator, Sheriff. Separation is still quite good unless a lot is going on. So it's a great headphone, closed-back headphone for Valorant. Now, one of the things I noticed is that like the audio step off in terms of emphasis, when footsteps are getting a tad bit too far and things are going on, you begin to lose those completely. So there's a little bit of a fall off with the occlusion of footsteps at a distance. Now, I wanted to effectively turn up presence a little bit to have those raised a little bit And I do effectively think that it worked for the 620S. If you marginally turn that to the right, it does have a beneficial impact slightly on the 620S. If I turn that width knob all the way to the right, the only thing it sounds like it's doing is cutting out the bass a little bit while maintaining maybe an emphasis in the presence region. So the soundscape feels as though it's getting a little bit cleaner. And what pulls out a little bit are things like gunfire and footsteps in Valorant. There's a give and take. My footsteps now sound tingy and tangy, while my gunfire is just way too elevated and the treble region is just upticked too much. So if I'm shooting the now elevation in my gunfire, I cannot hear anything going on. There's people shooting over in this direction. The door's closing right now. I cannot hear anything when I'm shooting. If I turn that width knob a little bit to the right, I turn that presence knob a little bit to the right, things get, again, a little bit tangy, the upper mid region coming through with a little bit too much emphasis, but things are coming through a little bit more elevated than they are in the default position. And it doesn't sound too overwhelming to have like a massive impact in the negative, like I think all the way to the right does on width. If we just turn it a little bit to the right in both directions, for Valorant on the 620S, gunfire coming through a little bit more elevated, the light shuffles coming through a little bit more elevated, and even when they are at distance here, coming through a tiny bit more elevated. Comparing, though, the default tuning to that effective benefit, it does not change the 620S. If I was to say this was, and this is just hypothetical, if I was to say this was a B on the wallhack certification tier list, EQing it would not make it a B+. It would not make it an A-. It would still be a B. It's just with that default tuning, now I can ever so slightly hear that area a little bit more. It does not make it so good that it elevates it to a different tier in that bracket on the competitive wallhack certification tier list for either headphones or IEMs. Now, turn it too far, and what it will do is make that B turn into a B- or a C+ or a C. Because when you effectively turn this more than just marginally, it ruins the frequency response of whatever you're plugging into this in a bad way. If I was to turn presence all the way up, now things are too bright. Things are too tangy in the upper mids. The thing that has the most impact in game will be the gunfire. And that gunfire will now drown out everything that is happening around me. If I'm shooting a Vandal, I can no longer hear a door opening or people running next to me in Valorant. So again, turn it too much, you do have a depreciation in the overall sound. If you turn it just marginally, you might notice an ever so slight benefit depending on the unit that you're plugging into this. Now, turn the width preset all the way to the right as well. The only thing, and that's advertised again as like having this massive increase in the soundstage, I don't notice that happening. What I notice is things in the space are getting dampened, while things in the presence and treble region are just being boosted. So like the ambient noise kind of gets cut off, the bass may be detracted a little bit, and the upper mids or the presence region still quite elevated. So like grenades going off in the map, gunfire going off on the map in Apex, I hear it. The other things I'm not so quite hearing. And then light shuffles, I'm losing a little bit. And things are just, it's not maintaining an elevation in the soundstage while not detracting from other things. It's a give and take, and it's too much of a give and take. It's not a cohabitable existence, if that makes sense. For instance, elevating that upper mid region did provide a little bit of a benefit with depth perception again in Apex, but during fights while I'm shooting, I'm still getting a detraction in that separation as a result of the elevation in gunfire. You're not gaining a benefit while not losing something else. And for that, I can't recommend this for its EQ functionality. What I can do, though, is recommend it for its default sound. Paired with a very good IEM, our collab, the Arete, I would be able to use this on its default basis at a price point of, again, just over $200 for an amp DAC, and it's exceptional. The default audio, again, it's not sterile like a topping. It's not a little bit darker like in SMSL. It's just a little smidge warmer than a topping product. So the default audio and tonality out of the unit is quite good. It's not like a Bifrost where it has this like misty warmth to it, which I loved the Bifrost too, but it's not providing that effect. It keeps things clean, and I'm getting a great sense of depth. I'm getting a great sense of spaciousness, and the power out of this unit, I was able to power the 490S, the 620S, the 770 Pro 250 ohm with plenty of headway, especially if you use the included wall power, or not included, but the sold separate wall adapter for additional power, which I think ran me an extra $15. So the unit is a very good amp deck at its default base settings. So think of this little tuning apparatus here on the right as something additional to play around with, but it's not something that's going to elevate your gaming experience. At least in my opinion. I just don't think it's going to do anything. If this caught your eye because of the soundstage thing, it's absolutely not good at all, in my personal opinion. The most important thing is to have something out of the box that has a really good tuning, a really good performance for gaming, and plug it into a nice amp deck, this being one of them. But when you start fooling around with EQ, again, it's a game of give and take, and I don't think it's necessary if you have a unit that has a very good tuning out of the box for gaming. So the 620S, I think, is a great headphone for comfort, for that resolution, for a closed back. It's one of the only ones that I've kept in my collection, because for, sitting down, listening to a podcast, listening to music, or taking this into a single player game, or taking it into, let's say, Deadlock in a MOBA, again, the localization is there, the imaging is good, and the sound I'm getting out of it is awesome. So would I use the 620S and recommend it for competitive gaming? For things on the wallhack certified tier list, I want things to be good for a multitude of titles, because it falls behind in those open, expansive maps. It falls behind in COD with separation. It falls behind in Apex for similar reasons. It's good in Valorant. I can definitely recommend it for that. But because it doesn't hit that spot for multiple titles, I would not have it on the wallhack certified tier list. And you might be able to get a little more out of it if you take the time to EQ it properly. I do think that dial EQs are just a little bit hard, man, because you just can't really dial in exactly what frequency you want to change. You kind of have to go with the flow and the changes that those little shifts in position bring to the frequency response itself. I do think that without the EQ, just turning that off, the Gunnr is an exceptionally good amp deck, especially at this price point with that microphone input. If anybody was looking for a good amp deck that you can use on your PC and cross over to your console, PS5, etc., I do think that this is a really nice, clean-sounding amp deck that will work well paired with a good IEM or good headphone in its default position, and I definitely do recommend it at this price point. I just think the dials are a little gimmicky. That's going to be it for this one, guys. I hope it helped. If it did, please leave a sub to the channel. See you guys in the next review. Peace.